So, um, as far as dealing with the current kind of global ramifications of what's going on right now with the virus and how it's kind of impacting business, what's really happening out there in, the HR trenches? What's it really like day to day?
Yeah, it's a great question. The HR trenches are wild. If you remember Mr. Toad's Wild Ride from Disneyland, it's crazy. It's like we are at a point of pure creation right now. Yeah, the expression is we're building the airplane as we fly it.
Hmm.
And every day brings these challenges. It's the law of unintended consequences. One thing gets fixed. And you know the thing when you squeeze the balloon in one place, but the bubble ends up 2 feet away, a little further down the line, you just don't see these things coming. So whereas as much as we can be on our feet, totally dedicated and totally committed, we're there, but it is very, very overwhelming, no matter where you look at it from. On the one hand, Gabby, what's interesting is you're looking at this Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. Then you're looking at the federal level. Then California is putting in its own safer at home programs and its iterations in terms of how California wants to do things, and every state is doing it the same way. Then you're looking at, LA Unified School District told us on Friday morning that at the close of business today, we're closing all of our schools in Los Angeles County. Holy cow. And within 2 days, we had to build an on-site childcare center with volunteers. I mean, that's how fast this stuff is moving. And it is quite a challenge for everybody. But again, like I say, it's a great opportunity to show outstanding leadership, because leadership and communication are what's needed right now the most.
Hmm. What are the biggest challenges you're facing in your role right now, kind of at this point in time?
Probably what's so hard is, as an HR professional in the trenches, you're trying to figure out how to interpret all this information you're getting. So on the one hand, every law firm, every insurance broker, they're putting on their own programs. Very, very helpful as you're trying to stay in touch with this, and it's all good for everybody, but it's a lot. So there's an information overwhelm kind of factor. Then you have these conflicting standards that you're learning about. So for example, I work as a chief human resources officer in a retirement facility. It's called a residential care facility for the elderly. But basically, we service entertainment people. This is where they come to retire. We're right outside of Hollywood. And that's a healthcare organization. So we have, what's the World Health Organization saying? And, what are they saying in Washington versus what is California saying at the California Department of Public Health? This information comes out, Gabby, and it's duplicative, it's redundant, there's overlap, there's conflicts, the laws don't agree with each other. You have to make these decisions on the spot as to what's going to work in your organization. And it's not easy because it's happening again in real time so quickly. You become like an adrenaline junkie. It's like, okay, let me turn on and see what's going on right now because it's different than it was an hour ago. But I think when you look at, there's a $2 trillion relief package coming down the pike, all of this stuff is great, but it's very hard to really put together cleanly and smoothly and transparently because, again, everyone has good intentions to make these changes happen, but they're coming so quickly, it does become a little bit difficult to make it real with all the conflict and the redundancy and the overlap that's sometimes contained in these rules and regulations.
Yeah, that information overload is something that I'm sure everyone is kind of dealing with right now. It's like, who do you even trust? Who's
I
right?
know, it's true. It's true. Again, they say this hasn't happened in our country in 100 years. And even if you look at that Spanish flu of 1918 after World War I, it didn't have the same kind of economic shutdown that we're seeing too. So this really is something that's a once in a lifetime, if not a once in a century type of event. And, I would say very optimistically, 80% of what I'm seeing out there is very positive. People are trying. Of course, not everyone is going to be in the same, wavelength when it comes to getting this stuff done. But overall, it's very positive. And I'm glad to see so many people coming together over this.
Yeah, yeah. So I know I'm in Nashville and I have a lot of friends, for example, who like worked on Broadway, who were musicians or bartenders or, servers. And,
You have cool friends,
I'm
yes.
just seeing, it's like I'm seeing, I guess it's been about 2 weeks that, Broadway pretty much shut down. A lot of my friends lost their jobs. And you're seeing that kind of have a compounding effect on, nonprofits in the area. And so just kind of all of those, you don't realize how it's just kind of like a domino effect, when you like just stop all business, it stops 10 other things. So,
Correct. Yeah.
so as far as like in your role, what are your biggest concerns moving forward, knowing that we are kind of dealing with all of these different factors kind of colliding at one time?
No, I think those are great questions. I think the thing that's really hard about this is you're trying to take a look at so many different pieces, so many things moving in parallel, in real time. But to the point, there's your fear of, am I going to get laid off? Is it going to be something where I'm going to be out of work and I'm not going to know how long? Because we know those statistics, 80% of Americans says pretty much they pay paycheck to paycheck. And
Mm-hmm.
you read those statistics over and over again, and it gets a little bit like humbling in the sense where, yikes, this is not going to be as easy as I thought. In my world, in particular, it's talent. Anyone who works in hospitals or healthcare or anything related to that field, you just can't find people. And that's been very difficult up to now. And now you take the scenario we're in where everyone is just gasping for oxygen to get the talent that they need. And you know that if this does continue the way it's looking, it may continue, the healthcare workers themselves are going to get sick. And so that's going to give you less to work with too. So there's the sense of foreboding. There's a sense of, oh my gosh, what happens if this whole thing really doesn't work where the sheer numbers totally overwhelm us? Hopefully it won't ever get to that point, but you have to prepare for it anyway. So every organization is looking at it differently, but I think the talent piece of this is probably going to be the make or break for most types of organizations, not just healthcare.
Yeah. So then, what's the difference for you being an actual HR practitioner in the trenches with us right now and, an author when it comes to an emergency like this? Like, how do you straddle those lines?
Nothing. I like to think, oh, I've written 10 books and all. Yeah, not now. It doesn't count. The reality of all this stuff is it's so new that what I'm basically relying on, honestly, Gabby, is 25 years of doing HR that's brought me to this point. And the big three for me in terms of what's critical is number one, leadership, number two, communication, and number three, team building. And you have to do that in an environment like this because if people don't feel like you have their backs, if people don't feel like they can make themselves vulnerable to a degree, people are frightened. Some people are like, it's not going to, touch me. It's not going to touch my life. Other people, batten down the hatches. They don't want to come out of their houses. They won't even be in the same room with their parents or grandparents. I understand that. I don't judge. It's okay. But you have to understand that there has to be a little bit of you for everybody on that spectrum. For the ones who are the brave, I'll take it on and I'm not afraid of anything, to the I'm afraid to, get out of bed this morning. EAPs, employee assistance programs, I'm sure are very busy right now because we do that with our employees too. Sometimes you just have to refer people to another qualified source that they can talk to in confidence, but get the help that they need. And that's what EAPs are for. So I think you have to be a little bit of everything for everybody at a time like this. But being an author and having written about different types of scenarios, I don't think there's an author on the planet who could know exactly what to do in the trenches in a situation like this. You just do your best and you make sure you communicate and you put your best foot forward. And you'll find that people tend to be patient. People tend to be forgiving as long as they feel like you're being honest and transparent with them. And the workers in our situation have been, you walk across the campus and they stop you and say, thank you for everything. We know how hard you're working. We know how hard you're trying. And when you hear that type of feedback, Gabby, it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned, even if you've written about this stuff for years and decades, uh, you still don't really know what to do because it's so new. So
Yeah.
as a manager or an HR practitioner, what are kind of your best tips, I guess, for attacking like a new challenge like this? Like when you come into a new challenge you've never like experienced in the HR space or in, just dealing with employees, what kind of factors do you look for, or how do you try to approach the challenge like programmatically, I guess, like.
I think it's a great question. Okay, so the one thing I will say is when you're in HR, a lot of times people will look at you as kind of the heart and soul of the company. They really do. I mean, HR is an important role because when you think of the people department, you're not thinking of sales, you're not thinking of the manufacturing floor. You know, you're oftentimes thinking, how does our HR department lead through this? And the expression is, more people are watching you than you think. And I don't mean that to make people paranoid, but I mean that in a chance and in a sense where you have a chance to really touch a lot of lives right now. So it is important as we go through this crisis that people can look to HR for the leadership. The other thing I would say is you have to become a good coach. Your own people, excuse me, Gabby, in your department, but more importantly, all of your clients in the company will need a certain level of coaching. And one of the things I tell people, do this little exercise. What are people going to say about you, Paul Falcone or whoever? What are people going to say about you when this is all over? If they have 3 adjectives to describe Paul Falcone and how he acted through that whole crisis, what he achieved, what he accomplished, what are they going to say? And just keep it high level like that. I want people to see the importance of this crisis. There's a saying that says something along the lines of, you know, never let a crisis go to waste. And what they're saying is crises pull out very extremes. And sometimes you don't see the best side of people, and I get that, but more often than not, you're going to see a lot of heroes that are, because of the opportunity, they can become heroes.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to ask yourself, are you someone who wants to include? Are you someone who wants to encourage? Are you someone who wants to embrace? Or are you someone who wants to resist? Are you someone who wants to exclude? Are you someone who, you know, you have to kind of figure out, where are you as that force? Is it a force for the positive or a force for the negative? And without any judgment, some people don't really believe in this whole thing of, I'm Superman in a time like this. I don't have to be. And I'm okay with that too. But I do want people to think about it because, listen, in most organizations, 80% of the people are working remotely now anyway. They're not even in the office location. Because I'm in healthcare, I am, so is my whole team, and most of our company is, with a few exceptions. So, because it's hands-on direct patient care is our environment. But the reality is there's a lot of opportunity here for the whole nation to become stronger, for the whole world to become closer. I mean, this is really a global pandemic. This is something where we all are now, doesn't matter if you're male or female or conservative or liberal, or doesn't matter. We're all on the same page on this one, and this could be a wonderful opportunity to unite all of us. But I think it has to start with you. It has to go to your team within HR and make it safe for them, and then it has to go out to your whole company so that people are looking at you for that type of leadership.
Yeah, and then just kind of a follow-up question, because you kind of got me thinking, you know, you were talking about EAP programs and resources like that, but at a time like this, how, I guess, like as an employer or as a manager, how do you kind of straddle that line between like being forgiving about maybe an employee just being very anxious, or maybe lessening, you know, not being as productive because of everything that's going on, versus like, you know, like how do you straddle that line between forgiveness and like, okay, we still gotta do business
We
as
still got to
usual.
get this stuff done. I know,
Yeah.
no, you're absolutely right. And it's a great question. And I think the reality becomes, there is an essence of, you know, I use a lot of expressions, let each soul walk its own path, right? I can't tell you not to feel anxious,
Mm-hmm.
nervous about this. What I can do is I can make it comfortable for you to come to my office if you're on my team, or even if you're not on my team, if you're a client, someone else in the company who relies on HR. It's good for them to be able to sit and talk. And you can ask them questions along those lines. Tell me about that. What can we do to help? You know, we're here, we have your back. Is there anything in particular that you're concerned about where we can help with some additional resources, whether it's an EAP or anything else? I think people need to feel listened to. There's something about when you talk about being a great communicator, a lot of times they say, oh, he speaks well, or she speaks well. And it's like, I get that, but that's not the whole thing. That's half of the equation. You have to be able to listen with empathy. And I think when people feel like they're heard, there's a calming effect to that. And they can kind of go back to their world and feel, okay, I'm still a little nervous, but I'm really glad I met with them. It made me feel better. That's what you want to be. And I think even if it doesn't come naturally to do that, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Start now. Now is the time for you to kind of build that in so you can be that empathetic listener, especially in times like these, which are pretty scary for certain people. And again, like I say, even if it's not scary for you, you want to be able to be there to hear them. That being said, some are not going to perform to the normal level. Some are going to overperform to make up for the crisis. It'll all work out. usually it balances out.
Would you mind jumping into kind of addressing the virtual team aspect?
Of course, sure, sure, sure.
Okay. So, as you know, a lot of businesses in response to the pandemic changes have shifted a lot of their business operations to remote, uh, using their remote capabilities to allow their workforce to work from home, which means a lot of people have turned into virtual team managers who may not have had that role before, or maybe they were only managing one person, who was, or a few people that were remote, but now their whole company is remote. And I just know our organization, it already feels like a huge change. It's been something we've had to adapt to,
Of course.
and we've changed a lot of our processes. But I think what's really interesting is, how do businesses who were maybe like in the middle of onboarding new employees or hiring new employees, how do they continue to do that effectively in a remote working environment? What kind of tips do you have?
In California, when they issued their safer at home laws, they basically said you shouldn't be out in public if you can avoid it. And obviously, we took it responsibly as a company. If we have, most of our employees are direct patient care, so they are coming to work. We're screening them at the front gate. We take their temperature and do all that. But the other employees, the more kind of quote unquote corporate employees, can work from home. And it took some time getting used to that. We're still getting used to it. We've only been doing it for a couple of weeks now. But we had to kind of set them up the right way. And I think as the leader in the department, we wanted to arm the department heads with their talking points to talk to their teams. First of all, our logic was, be careful with your hourly employees, your non-exempt employees, because there's special rules that apply to them in terms of taking breaks and meal periods, getting overtime requests approved before they work overtime. That stuff was an easy one. Okay, so that was pretty clear. But then you have the IT considerations, the data security, the proprietary information, the confidentiality. So we had to make sure that everyone was comfortable on that. Then you take them to the third tier, which talks about company policy and procedure. If you get injured at home, it's still a workers' comp claim. So you have to have a safe environment at home. But all the rules of code of conduct still apply. You kind of take your managers through these talking points so that they can get to a point where they're comfortable sharing this with their own staff members and getting that buy-in. Quickly to your point, for our clinical staff hiring, we're on fire. We're doing as much as we can. For our quote unquote, the corporate non-clinical, we're kind of slowing down on that. We don't know how busy we'll be able to keep them. So we're still touching base with candidates. We still have job postings up, but we're not rushing to get them in the door to interview, because we really can't get them in the door. Most of those interviews, most of our interviews in general, are happening just like this. They're happening virtually. The onboarding piece for us is usually a full day, once a month, where we bring all the new hires in. We have all the department heads give their presentations. We're truncating that, we're shortening it, so that we're doing it virtually now, and it only takes a few hours. We can always pick up with that and reintroduce that later down the line, a few months from now. But for right now, we still have to get them onboarded. We still want to make sure they know who everyone is and that sort of thing. But we've shortened that process down pretty significantly. And the final thought I'd have on this, Gabby, is you cannot over-communicate at a time like this. So what we're telling our managers is, when in doubt, err on the side of over-communicating. The truth of the matter is, no matter how much you communicate, people are still going to say it's not enough. But I think you have to have regular one-on-one meetings, virtual or by phone, video or by phone, where you're talking to your people, finding out where they're at least with your direct reports. And then your direct reports can do that with your extended reports, but everyone needs to kind of have that loop. And it should happen at least every other day. I wouldn't really go more than about 2 or 3 days, because people are getting used to this. And it's not like I'm watching them. I just want to make sure that we're all trimming the sails in the same direction. We're all pulling the boat in the same direction as far as the rows and how we're rowing the boat. That part of it can get lost. And that's the part that I get concerned about, when people are all of a sudden not working in a community setting and they're off on their own and maybe feeling isolated. They can very easily start making assumptions about what they're doing with their work, not consistent with the rest of the team. So, how's that for a long answer to a short question?
No, it was perfect. I think it's something a lot of people are really considering. I know our own team here at HarperCollins Leadership, we're doing actually like 2 quick team meetings a day. So
Good.
You know, like one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and then we're doing kind of consistent one-on-ones as well. So I just think it's really interesting how different businesses are approaching this, and I think it will be a real game changer. And really, I'm kind of excited to see where things go after this, just because I think a lot of businesses are having to really shift how they are going about things, and
Yeah.
maybe they'll, you know, maybe they'll see some value in certain parts of it, and maybe others they'll see where there's issues, you know. Um,
It's funny you bring it up, Gabby. I think there's going to be a lot of changes in business practices going forward. Companies, for example, that said, we will not do remote, all of a sudden have to do remote. And they're like, this isn't so bad. This kind of works. So, you know, it may be something that starts to change. That's just one example, but it could change the way business practices go forward, because some of this stuff really does work pretty well. And now we have a chance to play with the technology and see that you can really make this work. It's really cool. It's great.
yeah. Well, I think we're running up on time here. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about, you know, just how they can deal with this kind of uncertain environment and still like show up to work every day and have people's best
Whether
interests?
virtually or in person, right? I know.
Yeah.
No, you know, yeah, but just be kind to yourself. These are tough times. And I think some people are a little too tough on themselves at times like this. We all need to kind of take it down a little bit. There's an expression that I shared with my kids, which is change your perspective and you'll change your perception. And what I mean by that is if you change the perspective, if you change the way you look at it, you'll experience a different outcome. And
Hmm.
I think this is one of those times where it's like, okay, this is scary for some people, and I respect that. And this is a total change in anything anyone on this planet has ever seen, because we've never seen the planet shut down like this before. But
Hmm.
there's so much good stuff that I think that's going to come from this if we all work together. And you'll have very few opportunities in your lifetime to be a leader. And I don't mean that your title is a manager or above. I'm saying you can be an individual contributor and be a great leader. It's like in the third grade. Some kids are just great leaders. You can see it. Be that force for other people. People need that help. And I think this is an opportunity to invest in other people and make them feel included and make them feel good about themselves. And that's what we get for all of us. And I love the idea of that. So hope this helps. And it's always a pleasure talking to you, Gabby. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.